Well, hello, everyone. My name is Pejman Nozad, and I'm one of the partners at Pair Ventures. We are an early stage seed funds based in Silicon Valley. We invest across all sectors of technology at the earliest stage of a company. Imagine if you are in the garage with your co-founders and thinking about a product, that's where we get involved. Our investment team have started and sold 8 companies. Today, the portfolio companies of Pair worth over $80 billion. So it's a monumental achievement for our founders. If you're starting a company, we want to hear from you. But more importantly, my special guest today is my dear friend Farhad Massoudi, co-founder and CEO of Tubi TV. I let Farhad talk about his background on Tubi TV, which was sold last year for $500 million to Fox. But I tell you the story, I think around 2013 or 12, Farhad came to raise seed fund. Actually, it was 2012. And the idea was streaming video. And this is at the time that streaming wasn't like today. I think I want to bring it up because Farhad was really visionary about it. Today, it's everybody has a streaming. I'm actually in LA. I was driving now. I saw Paramount is coming with streaming and NBC. This is 2012, 11, and it wasn't really sure this is a big market. And Farhad came to me and he brought up the idea of streaming, but ad-based, so people don't pay advertising. And I said, Farhad, this never works, and I didn't invest. So he proved me wrong, and I love founders who prove me wrong, and they stick to their vision and they execute it. So Farhad, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations for such an amazing ride. I know this is just the beginning, but kudos to you to build such an amazing company. For the sake of this conversation, maybe give us a little bit background before Tubi TV, and then why did you decide Tubi TV the way you started it, and what was it, your past, because you were a CEO of an advertising company. Walk us through a little bit of your background and how did you get to start Tubi TV?
Well, Pejman, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here and great to join you. And I don't know if I would have invested in Farhad back then too, so I don't blame you for not investing. We got rejected by hundreds of VCs, so you were not alone in that bucket. My background, to answer your question, I was born in the United States, but I grew up in Iran, came to US for a summer vacation that never ended, ended up going to college at Berkeley near San Francisco, and then I ended up at Yahoo for several years, and then joined a startup company that ultimately failed, but I absolutely loved the experience, and also learned quite a bit about ad tech, as you mentioned. And I really wanted to do something in the startup community. I absolutely loved the challenge. I think the core thing that stuck with me and led me to start Tubi and really wanted to be an entrepreneur as a result was that I got to learn so much in such a short period of time, and about everything, anything from, not everything, but in terms of business. So anywhere from how to sell a business, how to pitch it, how to position it, how to do finance, how to do hiring, culture, grow the company. It was and on top of that, obviously advertising, media industry. So it was a phenomenal learning process. And so that led me throughout the years of all the difficult hustling and fighting the challenges of a startup company, led me to start Tubi and sort of push me over the years. So that's how I began.
Yeah. So for me, I actually think the astonishing things to me about founders like you is this insane amount of belief in your vision, that even when 100 VC says no to you, it doesn't change your mind. I understand that you learn, and you know where you want to end up. You might change a little bit of the road, but the destination is the same. So, and this wasn't obvious like 10 years ago that advertising would work, but obviously, first, starting the streaming business, it's hard on its own, no matter how the business model is, who's going to get the content, why you as a startup. But what was it that you had this belief that the advertising will work?
Well, look, I think, first of all, I don't know if
Let me ask you then, why did you describe actually Tubi TV business model? So I'm saying advertising, but it's good for the audience. You just talk about it.
Sure. So initially, the company name was called AdRise, and it was with the assumption that there's no way I can license content. Movies and TV shows are incredibly expensive to license. And at the time, there was no model for ad-supported video on demand. My co-founder actually coined the term AVOD, which is now used industry-wide. We were the first company to sort of really do this at scale. The thesis was very simple. And, I'm a very much of a, product-focused, vision-oriented type of founder. So I looked at every media sector, anywhere from print, news, music, etc. And it was very clear that digital has disrupted those categories in an incredible way. And the biggest market, both for advertising and for media, was television. And it was intact because of the power of so-called bundle. And so the challenge for us was that the VCs were burned by all the failed media companies that they had invested in. And media companies simply didn't believe in the future of streaming when we started. They thought the bundle, the Comcast bundle, the whatever cable company you use, is never going to break, and you're never going to be able to have access to the premium content in an a la carte basis. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit in the past decade. It was so for me, it was that if TV gets disrupted by digital in the same way that music and radio and you name it has been disrupted, then the TV advertising ecosystem, which at the time was about $80 billion, will be disrupted. And that's domestic, by the way, will be disrupted by streaming TV. And I also believe that that consumers will always want to have access to more entertainment, and if it comes for free and ad supported, so long as the ad load is reasonable, there will be a huge demand for it. Again, I think the challenge was that a lot of the investors tend to live in a income bracket where they don't like advertising, but I think that is that's really not the case for average American household. And so I think that was one of the things I struggled with explaining to investors and investor community.
In June 2019, you had 20 million active users, and in September that year, I see 120 million hours of content. And fast forward a year after, you have 30 million monthly users. I think this is astonishing in terms of the monthly active users with so many other services available. I know when you started streaming, getting content, it's very, very hard, especially for a startup. Can you share a little bit of your challenges and how you overcame, like getting you're a startup and you walk through like Disney or any other one. Talk about that.
Sure. Look. I mean, I'm an engineer from Silicon Valley. Grew up in Iran. My knowledge of media industry, and I'm not being humble, it was incredibly limited. I didn't even know half the shows that people grew up with in the U.S. So for me to walk into a major studio in Hollywood and ask for content, and we invented the revenue share business model, which everybody told us that that's impossible. There's no way they're going to agree to it. It was a really difficult challenge, and this is part of the learning process. I love learning and I love pushing myself, but we got years of no until someone, eventually, I think 5 years into our business, through a network I met, MGM and then Lionsgate shortly after, decided to invest in us a tiny amount of money and essentially said, you know what, let's try it. You know what, we give up. Fine, we'll give you some movies. Let's see if it works. And they were pretty convinced that it's not going to work, but they thought, what the heck, let's try it. And it worked really well. And so they got basically, they found oil as a revenue income. And so they doubled down, and then other people saw them. And they all double down. At this point, we work with pretty much every major studio in Hollywood, which is something that, frankly, I wouldn't even dare to say 10 years ago to an investor, because that would be impossible to achieve.
How did you manage fundraising in that process for 5 years? So,
Well,
founders like you see that a light at the end of the tunnel, but you need to gas to put in your car. So how did you
yeah, I
manage?
mean, it was not easy, right? It was not easy. But again, VCs didn't like media companies, and media companies didn't believe in streaming. And a lot of times I would get a reference call one of the VCs would do, who were sold on our idea, to a friend and say, I don't know, name a studio. And they would say, absolutely not. This is never going to happen. And so some of those folks are now looking for a job at Tubi, funny enough. But that's, unfortunately, I think media industry has defended the traditional revenue sources so hard that now they're faced with major disruption. So, I mean, I think we had a session, frankly, with, you introduced me to one of your friends who was expert in media industry, and same thing. The feedback was, there's no way you can get content, and there's no way with that content you'll be able to build a business. It turned out to be wrong. And I think our thesis was that, look, we are a data machine learning company that applies this technology to the media ecosystem. So it's hard for media companies to understand what that means, to use data and personalization for content delivery and discovery. So what we did was I ran the company with $35 million for almost 9 years. We had to make money to keep the lights on, and so it was not easy.
And that's incredible. And how do you keep, one of the questions I know founders mostly ask, even when you raise money in those days, how do you keep the day-to-day execution and keep your team motivated when there's no content? It's a long process. Even if they want, okay, if Disney said, okay, I want to give you content, it's not going to happen soon. This is a long process to them. So how do you make team motivated, keeping your focus?
If you were at Tubi, you were looking at the numbers, and we knew, not day one, but a couple years into it, we knew it was working. We could see it. We could see that the recommendations are having a dramatic impact on viewership and engagement. We could see that engagement is going up. We could see that we're getting better content, and that's increasing engagement. Our revenue, we had 5 years of triple-digit revenue growth back to back. So it was working. It wasn't, believe me, one day it will come. If one of the things I learned in this process, I know everyone says team matters is the most important thing. I said it too. I didn't think what it meant until I got lucky enough to have an incredible team around me. And the reality is these days I just get credit for all the incredible work they have done. We have just brilliant people on all functions who have done incredible things, and I think that all culminated in incredible growth for the company.
How do you adapt? How do you educate yourself to be a leader? You start, obviously you had experience before, but you start Tubi TV and the company grows in a way that you have 30 million users. So what you do as a leader at that time is very different when you start. What have you done to become a CEO of a much bigger company?
That's such a good question. Sorry.
Yeah, just walk us through what have you done?
No, it is a phenomenal question, because in reality, the skill set required to start a company, an idea that gets to product market fit, to take it to a team that is, building the version 1 of it, to scaling it to say 40, 50 people. And now all of a sudden, your communication channels need to be rethought, to now building, we have over 300 employees. And it is really difficult. It is incredibly difficult. I had really smart people around me that I tried to take feedback from. I think humility is really important in this process. Having a great board matters. Having advisors. I had a business coach. I've had a business coach for how many years? Many years now. And the reality is it's everyday work. It's just like an athlete working out a muscle. And if the moment you stop working out those muscles, you can tell the impact immediately of the company. And so, things like building company culture, building processes, building an executive team, these are things that most entrepreneurs like me learn on the job. And the reality is at first, you're really bad at it. Most people are. So as the company grows, so do you, or you have to. A lot of times the entrepreneur CEO is truly the bottleneck of the company. And if they don't think big and push themselves really hard and rethink how they execute and how they process things every 6 to 9 months, if you're doing the same thing you've been doing for the past 2 years, the company will fail ultimately. So those were not easy, but I mean, that's what makes it fun.
Well, you mentioned that team, and you had it seems you had an amazing team, but how did you figure out what kind of people? I know each company is different, and then is it any best practices you can share with anybody who's building a team and listening to you?
Well, so first of all, I don't hire brilliant jerks. I've learned that lesson, and they cost the company more than they add value. So that's one. But what at its core, what we try to hire at Tubi are people who have a growth mindset. And by that, I mean, during the interview, they're very much aware of where they need to improve on. Everybody says they have a growth mindset, but to be aware and conscious and constantly working on areas that one needs to improve on, that requires both a level of humility and self-awareness, and also allows different teams to be influenced by each other. Truth is, no marketing and engineering teams think alike, and so they're always going to disagree on their strategy. What's important is to sit around the table, discuss it, and find a path forward. And so that's not easy to do unless you have the right people around the table.
I want to go back to streaming industry. Can you tell us your view of the state of the streaming industry now? It seems every major studio thinks, okay, if they don't have streaming, they're out of business, and everybody's trying it. So where do you think it is today, and how do you see the future of streaming?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
Well, so maybe we back up a little bit. I mean, everybody knows Netflix obviously was the major catalyst in the space. They have had an incredible growth, phenomenal business they have built there. With the growth of Netflix came the decline of TV ratings, which meant that pretty much all major media companies were impacted by it. And so now the pendulum has swung the other way. So now everybody and their cousins are all launching a new streaming service. And I think that in fact, I think Wall Street is overreacting to it now. Every media company is announcing number of subs, and Wall Street is rewarding these companies by a multiple and number of subscribers. As a VC, I'm sure you would appreciate this, that just showing number of subs is not indicative of the health of the business. If I spend $1 billion and get another 100,000 subs, that means nothing. And today, what's exactly what's happening? They're bearing those costs under the larger media umbrella, and they're showing massive growth in the number of subs, but nobody really understands what's under the hood. Is it healthy? Is it sustainable? Is it long-term, or is it a short-term gain? So where we are now is that, especially with COVID, in the COVID world, the so-called cord cutting has accelerated, and so more and more people are watching on streaming content and watching on TV apps as opposed to TV channels, and as a result, media companies are now everybody's launching a new subscription streaming service. So to answer your question, there's no way on earth that you're going to have average households subscribing to, say, 10 subscription services. And if you look at how many streaming services are out there and how many their subscribers they're projecting to have over the next few years, it's an impossible math. So if you assume that Netflix is the winner and then Amazon is not going to care how much they spend money because it's Amazon, and then you've got Disney with Hulu and Disney Plus next. So that's your top four. And as you go further down the list, not only the number of subs shrinks, but their retention drops because people are going to switch between these services. And that means more and more there are impossible businesses ultimately. And so a lot of these media companies are betting that they will be the 7th largest subscription-based streaming service in the country. And I don't believe that business model actually works. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I suspect that if that equation doesn't work, you're going to see even more consolidation and mergers between the big media giants. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And there'll be a few winners.
So that interesting you say, so there's a merge, I mean, massive merger happened. You know, one of the things I'm thinking, and I'd like to get your view, is consumer. Do they pay for every single streaming service? How do they choose? Especially you don't know what's the next content is coming. What do you think how do you see the user behavior, consumer behavior who are paying for these services?
Well, look, it's important to put it in context because I think a lot of people argue, well, they also should be under one umbrella because that's better user experience, but that's not practical. The reality is that, first of all, we're talking about subscription, so-called SVOD services, right? In that universe, the number one, number two players are never going to bundle with someone else, meaning Netflix and Amazon. Amazon has its own bundle today, and there is no way Netflix will partner with a smaller subscription service and bundle together. In fact, there's a reason you don't see Netflix content inside, say, Apple TV Plus. They want, and that's exactly what they should be doing. They want a controlled experience, recommendation, data collection, all those are critical to their business. So long as Netflix and Amazon are not gonna bundle or appear in the same interface, the idea of one day, you're going to have one UI for everything is not really realistic, at least not in the short term. And so it's really going to come down to, a few general media applications, probably one or two complementary free services, right? And then you're going to go specific. If you're into, say, sports, I know, Pejman, you're a fan of soccer, so you might subscribe to, some of these services that have access to European games. And I think that's really, at least for the foreseeable future, how you're going to consume media.
Well, I actually have a question from anonymous attendee. He said, Farhad, do you think sports streaming follows these trends, or is that industry going somewhere else?
Do we have a few hours? So let me summarize it by saying that sports is really complex. Unfortunately, in general, licensing is incredibly complicated. It's been over-lawyered for decades. So, it's not easy to just say, let's go get NFL rights and put it on a subscription service and put it out. In fact, that's a good example. And no company in the United States has full rights to NFL. If you're a fan of American football, Fox has some, NBC has some, and so CBS airs NFL. So they only have a partial access. So they, obviously you can subscribe to CBS All Access and watch a portion of NFL games, and not all of them. Some other leagues, it's easier. You can get, for example, on Peacock, you can get Premier League, all of those. And no, Paramount Plus will not have all NFL games. They will have access to a subset of NFL games. So yeah, it's just really complicated. I think sports will ultimately move in that direction, but some of these deals, like the NFL deal, are usually signed for a decade. Right now, actually, is a negotiation. Famously, there's a lot of conversation around NFL rights, and the deal times are usually, very long, 5 to 10 years. So again, that unfortunately will take a little bit longer than some consumers would want.
What I want to go back to Tubi TV. So, what is the future look like, and what are your plans, as much as you can talk about it?
Yeah, look, for us, we have a dramatically different strategy than any other streaming service in the market. Everybody, essentially, for entertainment-focused media streaming services, they focus on originals, and they need to justify themselves on your bill at the end of the month with their originals. Think of HBO without their originals. I don't think most of their consumers would stick around. We do completely opposite. We're all about personalization and super serving users. So instead of acquiring movies that appeal to a large portion of the American audience, we acquire content that maybe you will love, but not everybody else on this call. And so using machine learning, we try to quickly figure out how to pair you with the right piece of content. And once we figure it out, which is not an easy task, then we can serve you hours and hours of content. We have 5 times the library of Netflix, actually 6 times the Netflix library on Tubi, by far the largest library of content in the world. And so that combination of recommendation engine with a massive library is incredibly powerful. So that's what we're going after. And so we're not really impacted by the crazy overhyped streaming market right now.
I have another question in this regard. Do you think ad-based streaming like Tubi gains more market share from subscription-based streaming, especially as ad spend on linear TV tries to move somewhere else?
Yes, I do. And the reason I think we'll gain more market share is because, frankly, we started with 0 and we're here. So it was all, a couple of years ago, it was 99.9% subscription based. So I think you'll see more and more content on free services. You're going to see better and better content every month on free streaming services, and more relevant content. And I have to say, what makes us really compelling for a lot of consumers isn't that it's free or not, but a lot of times removing friction and making it accessible to everyone is a huge deal. Charging a penny and charging nothing, and there's a big difference between those two options. So again, huge opportunity for AVOD businesses.
Do you ever see Tubi creates its own original content, given you have partnership with Fox, your partner Fox?
I think we will always look at everything and every option. I have learned that even statements that I made a couple of years ago that, here's our strategy, here are the things we will never do, here are the things we do. I revisit them every couple of years, and a lot of times we change them. So I think as the market evolves and our revenue increases, we'll look at the various options, see what happens.
Well, if you do, just consider me as somebody plays your first movie.
Amazing.
I passed on Tubi TV, so.
Great, first Tubi original.
Yes. Farhad Marashi is asking, Farhad, how do you utilize the customer's feedback into your model?
So we get feedback from so many channels. First of all, we track everything within the app, and so that's incredibly valuable. We built, one of the challenges we had as a company is we're on, over 25 platforms, anywhere from your iPhone to your Roku device to your Comcast set-top box to Samsung Smart TV. So it's various platforms, various technological infrastructure. So it's really complex, and there was no really good analytics platform for it. So we built our own analytics platform for TV, which was foundational to our business. We look at reviews, we do surveys, we have focus groups, and then we do real-time analysis on what people are doing or liking or not liking on our app. So it's a very thorough process on that front.
What is a typical day look like to Farhad Massoudi? Tell us what you do when you wake up, what time you wake up, and what you do the rest of the day.
Well, I mean, the day in the COVID world is very different than the day pre-COVID. So these days I wake up around 7. Let's just say in the past 2 weeks, I've gotten back to my workout routine. I don't want to say I've been doing that forever. So I try to do my workout, and then I'm on calls back to back. My role is less of doing, which was, my role has evolved over time. And so I was a lot more involved even a couple of years ago in the everyday, day-to-day activity or every function. And so now I'm lucky to have an incredible team. So really my job is to make sure that I understand the challenges, that I can help where I can. I clarify strategy. I clarify communication channels between the team members. And I focus on building a culture and maintaining a culture and evolving the culture that attracts right talent and helps us grow. Really, my job is to essentially open up the lanes and let the team run.
I think this is very important because many people talk about culture, but from distance, there's not the definition. Can you elaborate more when you say, I want to make sure the culture and build the culture? What is it, the culture and Tubi, and how do you enforce it?
Yeah, look, every company is going to have naturally different cultures, and I think that's necessary. It is a mistake to copy a successful company's culture and implement it at your company. I am a different person, and my strengths are different. My team's strengths are different. So, and then we're in a different industry. I mean, an industry that is, say, in manufacturing requires a different culture than in the company that's in a, I don't know, media industry. So you have to look at what cards you're dealt with, and based on that, build a culture that makes sense for you, and then evolve it. But essentially, it is about a set of values that you believe are not only right, but also will help the business. And then, usually when you work on it after 6 months and get all the feedback, when you put it in front of the team, everybody's shaking their head and going, yes, that's differentiated. We're different. And these values I respect, and I believe they will get us to the next level. So, so that's, to me, the culture. And it's never there's no such thing as a great company culture, because it's constantly evolving. And it's never done. So it's an ongoing process.
Babak is asking, are you evaluating any new device types like AR, VR to differentiate content delivery and creation?
The problem with AR, VR category is that the distribution channels are so small that it's still too early. And so, we look at them, but it's still a very nascent market. And I don't see, short of Apple, Google with their phones come up with as a mechanism to scale it, I don't see people buying Oculus devices, in millions anytime soon. So that's the challenge.
If you want to recommend a movie to the audience to watch, one of your favorite movies, what is it?
Well, the one that comes to mind, I just watched and absolutely loved it, is The Sound of Metal. If you haven't seen it, it's a rather dark movie, but I thought it was a phenomenal movie. I really loved it.
Sound of Metal.
Sound of Metal.
Okay, Farhad. I can't finish any conversation with the Persian founder not asking what is your favorite Persian food.
Fesencun, definitely fesencun.
Yeah, I think for the audience, this is a Persian stew which is pomegranate paste, walnut, and chicken. Actually, is my favorite also. So I did.
Oh, great.
You're agreeing one together. Anyway, Farhad, I just want to appreciate very much. This is I know we can go long this conversation. I'm pretty sure audience on this speaker series learn a lot, including myself. I promise you next time if you start something, I just we commit to invest. So I think I don't make mistake twice. The same
I
thing.
appreciate it. That's very kind of you.
But I just want to thank you and congratulations to building an amazing company inside a very competitive, very hard industry. This is not easy. So salute to you and your team, and looking forward to an amazing few more years with Tubi TV.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to have the conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.